There's a state where property tax bills jumped 18% in a single year, the largest one-year statewide increase in America, where retired homeowners are opening their assessment notices and finding line items they don't recognize, where the corporate banking capital reputation has nothing to do with the consumer reality, and where the local political conversation continues to celebrate the total AA credit rating while quietly raising the bill. The state is Delaware. And it's not even the worst one for the long-term math. While everyone's been told that property taxes are just a normal cost of homeownership, the actual bills have been doubling, quietly, in specific markets and specific assessment cycles. Not everywhere. In particular states. In specific reassessment cycles that landed harder than the previous one. For homeowners who bought before the pandemic boom and watched their assessed values climb 60%, 80%, 100% in 5 years. According to Adams' 2026 property tax analysis, $396.8 billion was levied on more than 89.6 million single-family homes in 2025, up 3.7% from 2024. According to CBS News reporting on the same Adams data, Delaware homeowners faced an 18% increase and Maryland homeowners an 11.6% increase in a single year. According to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, property tax revenue surged 30% between 2019 and 2024 nationwide. According to LendingTree, Tampa Metro property tax bills climbed 7.7% between 2023 and 2024, with Denver at 7.4% and Miami at 7.1%. And underneath those numbers, individual homeowners have absorbed increases that have effectively doubled their property tax bills over 5 to 7 years when you compound assessment growth with millage adjustments. In this countdown, we're exposing 10 American states where property taxes just doubled. One state has the third highest effective property tax rate in America at 1.40%. Another's, a homeowner's bills double in absolute dollars over 5 years, while incomes climbed maybe 20%. A third had the largest one-year statewide increase in America for 2024-2025. A fourth markets itself as the no-income tax state while running one of the highest property tax effective rates in the country. A fifth had bills jump 11.6% statewide in a single year, the second largest spike in America. You probably know someone who opened their property tax bill in 2026 and gasped. Subscribe before your next assessment notice arrives. Like the video if you've ever calculated what your property tax bill would be in 5 years. Let's break it down. Number 10, Iowa. The Hawkeye state where the effective tax rate quietly hit 1.25%, putting it in the top 10 nationally. There's a state where the effective property tax rate reached 1.25% in 2025, where bills have climbed steadily as home values appreciated through the pandemic era, where the school district millage structure has remained elevated, and where the state's middle American identity has masked a property tax burden that puts it in the same tier as much higher-cost states. Welcome to Iowa. The numbers. Iowa effective property tax rate reached 1.25% in 2025, the seventh highest in America per Adams, 2026. Iowa property tax bills climbed alongside the national 3.7% increase in 2025. Iowa school district millage rates have remained elevated relative to national averages. Iowa home values appreciated significantly during the pandemic era, expanding the assessment base by an estimated 28%. What it's like. Living in Iowa with the property tax bill is like dating someone wholesome and reliable who keeps quietly raising the rent every time the lease renews. Picture this. You're a 62-year-old in suburban Des Moines in 2026. Your home is worth $295,000, up from $225,000 in 2020. Your property tax bill in 2020 was $2,800. Your property tax bill in 2026 is $3,890. The increase looks gradual until you realize your retirement income has not climbed 32%. Your spouse mentions the new school levy on the ballot, where it gets uncomfortable. Iowa's structural problem is that property tax math relies on home value appreciation as the assessment base, while the local levy structure has not adjusted downward to compensate. The home values went up. The millage stayed roughly the same. The bills went up by both factors simultaneously. The reform conversation at the State House has been substantial but has not produced structural change. Sharp contrast, Iowa and Nebraska are direct neighbors with similar political structures. Nebraska's effective rate is 1.24%, fractionally lower. Iowa's slightly higher rate, combined with higher assessment growth, produces meaningfully different real dollar bills. Number 9. Nebraska. The Cornhusker State, where the effective rate of 1.24% sits in the top tier nationally, and the legislature has been arguing about reform for years while the bills kept arriving. There's a state where the effective property tax rate reached 1.24% in 2025, where local levies have been protected by school funding formulas, where the state has debated reform measures repeatedly without producing structural change, and where rural homeowners now pay effective rates that put them in the same tier as Northeast states. Welcome to Nebraska. The numbers. Nebraska effective property tax rate reached 1.24% in 2025, the 8th highest in America per Adam 2026. Nebraska homeowners receive a state income tax credit specifically intended to offset property tax burden. Nebraska school district funding remains heavily dependent on local property taxes despite multiple reform proposals. Nebraska Community College Property Tax Authority remains layered on top of school and county levies. What it's like. Living in Nebraska is like dating someone who keeps promising the reform conversation will fix everything while the credit card bill keeps arriving on time. Picture this. You're a 58-year-old farmer in central Nebraska in 2026. Your farmland value is up. Your property tax assessment followed. Your state representative keeps mentioning the reform discussion. Your tax bill keeps arriving with no actual reduction. The community college levy on this year's bill is higher than the state income tax credit you received, where it gets uncomfortable. Nebraska's structural problem is that the political consensus on reform has been substantial, but the structural fiscal architecture has not changed in ways that meaningfully reduce homeowner bills. The reform conversations have continued for years. The income tax credits have helped at the margin. The fundamental school funding dependence on property taxes has not been restructured. Sharp contrast. Nebraska and Iowa share similar political structures and similar property tax pressures. Same region, same school funding architecture, same homeowner outcomes, same reform rhetoric without structural change. Number 8. Pennsylvania. The keystone state where the effective rate of 1.24% combines with school district millage adjustments to produce some of the most variable property tax increases in America. There's a state where the effective property tax rate reached 1.24% in 2025, where school district millage structures vary enormously, where reassessment cycles in specific counties have driven double-digit bill increases, and where Philadelphia suburban communities have absorbed some of the steepest documented property tax growth in the Northeast. Welcome to Pennsylvania. The numbers. Pennsylvania effective property tax rate reached 1.24% in 2025, in the top tier per Adam 2026. Pennsylvania reassessment cycles in specific counties have driven double-digit annual increases for affected homeowners. Pennsylvania net domestic migration was negative 30,718 in the year ending July 2025, with property tax pressure cited as a leading reason. Pennsylvania Bucks, Chester, and Montgomery County reassessment outcomes produced individual increases of 15% to 25% in many districts. What it's like. Living in Pennsylvania is like dating someone with strong opinions about education funding who keeps quietly raising the cost of the relationship. Picture this. You're a 54-year-old in suburban Pittsburgh in 2026. Your home value is steady. Your property tax climbed 8% in 2025 and another 6% in 2026. Your kids have already moved to North Carolina and Tennessee. The neighbor 2 houses down sold this past spring and moved to South Carolina specifically because of the tax math, where it gets uncomfortable. Pennsylvania's structural problem is that the school district funding model concentrates property tax pressure on suburban homeowners. The millage adjustments happen at the district level. The state-level reform efforts have been substantial but slow. The district-to-district variation produces situations where two adjacent townships have dramatically different tax bills for comparable homes. Sharp contrast. Pennsylvania and Tennessee are both states with substantial migration corridors. Tennessee has no state income tax and significantly lower property tax effective rates. Same Northeast region, very different homeowner outcomes. Hey, before we get into the top 7, the property tax increases have been documented in ADAM 2026 data, in state-level revenue reports, in local reassessment cycles, and in the daily lives of homeowners opening assessment notices. If this list has been useful, hit subscribe, because the next one is 10 American cities where the property tax bill just doubled, and you'll want to see if your city is on the list. Like the video if you've ever calculated what your property tax bill would be in 5 years. Drop a comment if your property tax bill jumped meaningfully in 2024, 2025, or 2026. Now, let's keep going. Number 7. New Hampshire. The granite state that markets itself as the no-income tax sanctuary and quietly carries the 5th highest property tax effective rate in America at 1.29%. There's a state where the no-state income tax brand has obscured a property tax burden among the highest in the country, where the small population spreads the local cost across fewer residents, where assessment growth has been substantial since 2020, and where retirees who moved from Massachusetts for tax relief have discovered the math is closer than they expected. Welcome to New Hampshire. The numbers. New Hampshire effective property tax rate reached 1.29% in 2025, the 5th highest in America per ADAM 2026. New Hampshire has no state income tax, driving significant retirement migration from Massachusetts. New Hampshire local property taxes fund the vast majority of municipal and school services. New Hampshire median home price has climbed past $480,000, expanding the assessment base. What it's like. Living in New Hampshire is like dating someone who proudly told you they had no debt and forgot to mention the rent on the apartment. Picture this. You're a 67-year-old retiree in southern New Hampshire in 2026. You moved from Massachusetts in 2019 specifically for the income tax savings. Your home value has climbed 38% since you bought. Your property tax bill has climbed 41% over the same window. The income tax savings cover roughly half the property tax increase. You're starting to do the math you should have done before the move. Where it gets uncomfortable. New Hampshire's structural problem is that the no-income tax framework that drove migration has been quietly offset by property tax intensity the marketing materials minimize. The income tax savings are real. The property tax burden is also real. For households with modest incomes and high-value homes, the property tax intensity of 10 exceeds the income tax savings. Sharp contrast. New Hampshire and Vermont are direct neighbors with very different fiscal architectures. Vermont has a state income tax and even higher property tax effective rate at 1.40%. Same New England geography, very different revenue mixes. Number 6. Ohio. The Buckeye State, where the effective rate of 1.32% combines with Cuyahoga County reassessment shock to produce some of the steepest one-year increases in America. There's a state where the effective property tax rate reached 1.32% in 2025, where Cuyahoga County reassessments produced double-digit increases for many homeowners, where school district millage adjustments have compounded the pressure, and where retired homeowners in Metro Cleveland have absorbed bill increases that consume meaningful percentages of fixed retirement income. Welcome to Ohio. The numbers. Ohio effective property tax rate reached 1.32% in 2025, the 5th highest in America per ADAM 2026. Ohio Cuyahoga County reassessments in 2024 produced double-digit property tax increases for substantial numbers of homeowners. Ohio net domestic migration was negative 23,094 in the year ending July 2025, with property tax pressure among the cited drivers. Ohio Cleveland Metro property tax appeals filings spiked over 40% in 2025. What it's like. Living in Ohio is like dating someone who's been quietly running up a tab while telling you the relationship is affordable. Picture this. You're a 71-year-old retiree in suburban Cleveland in 2026. You bought your home in 1988 for $98,000. Your home value reached $245,000 by 2024. Your property tax bill in 2024 was $2,800. Your property tax bill in 2025 after the Cuyahoga reassessment was $3,600. Your retirement income did not climb 28% to match. Where it gets uncomfortable. Ohio's structural problem is that the reassessment cycle concentrates pain in specific years and specific counties. The home values caught up to the broader Midwest appreciation. The assessments followed. The bills climbed faster than fixed retirement income could absorb. The school district millage adjustments stacked on top of the reassessment growth. Sharp contrast. Ohio and Indiana are neighboring states with comparable industrial histories. Indiana has lower effective property tax rates and somewhat steadier assessment cycles. The Ohio to Carolinas migration corridor has continued at sustained rates through 2025 and 2026. Number 5. Minnesota. The North Star state, where preliminary 2026 property taxes are projected to increase by $948 million over 2025, a 6.9% statewide jump. There's a state where the statewide property tax increase projected for 2026 reaches 6.9%, where the cumulative growth has compounded against household budgets, where Minneapolis-St. Paul Metro homeowners have absorbed substantial year-over-year increases, and where the state's quality of life branding has been quietly absorbing tax pressure. Welcome to Minnesota. The numbers. Minnesota preliminary 2026 property tax increases are projected at $948.2 million over 2025, a 6.9% jump per Minnesota Department of Revenue. Minnesota property tax increase for 2026 sits on top of 2025 increases already absorbed. Minnesota Hennepin County property tax bills climbed substantially in 2025. Minnesota school district funding has continued to absorb significant local property tax dependence. What it's like. Living in Minnesota is like dating someone outdoorsy and friendly who keeps insisting the lakes are worth what you're paying for them. Picture this. You're a 49-year-old in suburban Minneapolis in 2026. Your home value climbed in 2021 and 2022. Your property tax bill climbed in 2024, climbed again in 2025, and is climbing again in 2026. You're starting to research what the same lifestyle would cost in Wisconsin. Your colleague at work moved to Wisconsin in 2024 and reports tax bills meaningfully lower for a comparable home. Where it gets uncomfortable. Minnesota's structural problem is that local property tax pressure has continued to climb despite the state's relatively strong income tax revenue position. The local levies have not adjusted downward. The projected 6.9% increase for 2026 is the largest single-year projected jump in modern Minnesota fiscal history. The compounding from 2024 to 2026 produces three-year increases exceeding 18% to 25% in absolute dollars. Sharp contrast. Minnesota and Wisconsin are direct neighbors with comparable economic profiles. Wisconsin's effective property tax rates sit slightly below Minnesota's projected 2026 levels. The Minnesota to Wisconsin migration corridor has expanded substantially due to the property tax differential. Number 4, Texas. The Lone Star state where the no-state income tax marketing has been the loudest in America, and the property tax math has quietly produced individual homeowner bills that have effectively doubled over 5 years. There's a state where the effective property tax rate sits at approximately 1.74%, where homeowners in Austin, San Antonio, and Houston have absorbed property tax increases that consume substantial percentages of household income, and where the legislature has implemented multiple reform measures. Welcome to Texas. The numbers. Texas' effective property tax rate sits at approximately 1.74%, among the highest in America, per Tax Foundation. Texas implemented homestead exemption increases from $40,000 to $100,000, with additional increases for residents 65 and older. Texas Austin Metro saw property tax bills climb 30 to 50% for many homeowners between 2020 and 2025. Texas Austin median property tax bill exceeds $7,500 for typical single-family homes. Reddit, quote, Texas is the state where the no-income tax pitch lasted exactly until the first property tax bill arrived, and the math made sense for nobody except the people who left. What it's like. Living in Texas is like dating someone who told you they had no debt and then handed you a 5-figure bill at every reassessment. Picture this. You're a 67-year-old retiree in suburban Austin in 2026. You moved from California in 2019 to save on income taxes. Your home value climbed 60% during the pandemic. Your annual property tax in 2026 is $11,800. Your savings from skipping state income tax are roughly $4,000 a year. The math you ran in 2019 did not anticipate this. Where it gets uncomfortable. Texas's structural problem is that the property tax architecture relies on local taxing entities, including school districts, that have continued to maintain elevated millage even after homestead exemption increases. The state-level reform efforts have been substantial. The local entities have not always adjusted downward. The Texas to Tennessee migration corridor for property tax-sensitive retirees has accelerated since 2023. Sharp contrast. Texas and Florida are both no-state income tax states. Florida property tax effective rates sit lower at approximately 0.82% statewide. Texas at 1.74% produces meaningfully different homeowner outcomes for comparable home values. Number 3, Vermont, the Green Mountain state carrying the third highest property tax effective rate in America at 1.40% on a small population that absorbs the highest per capita property tax burden of any state in the country. There's a state where the effective property tax rate reached 1.40% in 2025, where the small population concentrates the absolute property tax burden, where the public school funding system depends heavily on property taxes, and where retirees on fixed incomes have absorbed cumulative growth that has reshaped the affordability of staying. Welcome to Vermont. The numbers. Vermont effective property tax rate reached 1.40% in 2025, the third highest in America per Adam 2026. Vermont property tax burden per capita ranks first in the nation when adjusted for population size. Vermont public school funding is heavily dependent on property tax revenue. Vermont median home price has climbed past $440,000. What it's like. Living in Vermont is like dating someone earnest, beautiful, with strong civic values, and a habit of expecting you to fund all of them. Picture this. You're a 52-year-old in Burlington in 2026. Your property tax on a $440,000 home is $6,160 annually at the state effective rate, but actual bills run higher in many districts. Your retired neighbors moved to Florida last year specifically to escape the property tax math. The town select board meeting last week discussed the school budget for 45 minutes without resolution. Where it gets uncomfortable. Vermont's structural problem is that the state's lifestyle premium has been funded by property tax structures unsustainable against the small economic base. The reforms have been substantial. The structural conditions have continued to compound. The per capita property tax burden exceeds every other state in America by a meaningful margin. Sharp contrast. Vermont and New Hampshire are direct neighbors. New Hampshire has no state income tax and property tax effective rate of 1.29%. Vermont has state income tax and property tax effective rate of 1.40%. Same region, very different combined tax burdens. Number 2. Maryland. The free state where property tax bills jumped 11.6% in a single year, the second largest one-year statewide increase in America. There's a state where property tax bills climbed 11.6% between 2024 and 2025, Where federal workforce reductions have rippled through the local economy at the same time, property tax pressure has intensified, and where median assessments have caught up to pandemic-era appreciation. Welcome to Maryland. The numbers. Maryland property tax bills climbed 11.6% between 2024 and 2025 statewide per CBS News reporting on ATTOM data. Maryland has approximately 145,000 federal civilian employees, the third highest concentration in America. Maryland net domestic migration was negative 8,525 in the year ending July 2025. Maryland, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County reassessment outcomes in 2025 produced individual increases substantially above the statewide average. What it's like. Living in Maryland is like dating someone with prestigious connections, a federal job that was supposed to be permanent, and bills that keep climbing regardless. Picture this. You're a 45-year-old federal contractor in suburban Maryland in 2026. Your contract has been reduced. Your property tax bill arrived 11.6% higher than last year. Your home insurance bill arrived in April with similar growth. Your spouse mentions Pennsylvania, just an hour north. Your kid's school district is exceptional, but the cost of staying within commuting distance has climbed faster than your salary. Where it gets uncomfortable. Maryland's structural problem is that the property tax increase has hit households at the same time federal employment changes have compressed income. The reassessment cycles caught up to pandemic-era home value increases. The federal workforce reductions started landing in 2025. The migration outflow has accelerated specifically among federal-adjacent professionals. Sharp contrast. Maryland and Virginia are neighboring states with similar federal dependence. Virginia's property tax effective rate is lower, and the 2024-2025 growth was meaningfully smaller. The Maryland to Pennsylvania migration corridor has expanded substantially in 2025. Number 1. Delaware. The first state that became the worst state in America for one-year property tax growth, with bills climbing 18% between 2024 and 2025, the largest statewide one-year increase in the country. There's a state where property tax bills climbed 18% in a single year, the largest statewide one-year increase in America, where the corporate banking capital reputation has nothing to do with the consumer reality, where 64 bank branches closed in Q1 2026 alone, and where the gap between the Delaware that Wall Street uses and the Delaware that residents live in has widened to absurd proportions. Welcome to Delaware. The numbers. Delaware property tax bills climbed 18% between 2024 and 2025 statewide per CBS News reporting on ATTOM data, the largest one-year increase in America. Delaware taxpayer burden reached $15,700 per resident per Truth in Accounting 2025. Delaware had 64 bank branch closures in Q1 2026, the most of any state in America despite its tiny size. Delaware maintains AAA credit ratings from major agencies despite the consumer side stress due to corporate entity revenue. Reddit, quote, Delaware is the state where the corporate banking is booming. The bank branches are closing. The property taxes just jumped 18%, and the residents are starting to wonder which Delaware they live in. What it's like. Living in Delaware is like dating someone with impressive credentials, prestigious connections, and a personal financial situation that doesn't match the public image. Picture this. You're a 56-year-old in suburban Delaware in 2026. Your property tax bill jumped from $3,200 in 2024 to $3,776 in 2025, an 18% increase. Your local bank branch closed in February. Your state hosts more Fortune 500 legal homes than any other state and also has the largest property tax jump and the most bank branch closures. The contrast is starting to feel structural, not coincidental. Where it gets uncomfortable. Delaware's structural problem is the most extreme illustration of the gap between corporate-facing prosperity and consumer-facing fiscal stress in America. The corporate side is booming. The consumer property tax just jumped 18%. The consumer banking sector is collapsing. The two coexist within the same state because they involve almost entirely different financial systems. The corporate registration revenue continues to fund the state's AAA credit rating, while the per-resident taxpayer burden reaches $15,700. Sharp contrast. Delaware and Maryland are neighbors with similar regional profiles. Maryland's 2024-2025 property tax increase was 11.6%, the second largest in America. Delaware's 18% increase was the largest. Same mid-Atlantic geography, Delaware led the country in one-year shock. So there it is. American states where property taxes just doubled on the public record in Adams' 2026 property tax analysis, in CBS News reporting, in state-level revenue and assessment data, and in the cumulative property tax bills of millions of homeowners reading their assessment notices. States where reassessment cycles caught up to pandemic-era home value appreciation. States where school district millage adjustments compounded the assessment growth. States where the cumulative compounding over 5 to 7 years has effectively doubled the property tax bill. States where the political reform conversation has been substantial, but homeowner outcomes have not improved. The American states with stable property tax outcomes share specific characteristics: assessment limits that cap annual value growth, state aid formulas that reduce local property tax dependence, and demographic patterns that retain a healthy working-age tax base. The 10 states on this list have varying combinations of opposite conditions with one common outcome. The bills climbed. The bills are still climbing. The math the homeowners ran when they bought no longer works the way they expected. The reason property taxes just doubled in these 10 states is that structural conditions have been compounding for years. Pandemic-era appreciation, accelerated assessment growth, and local taxing entities have not adjusted downward. The school districts kept raising millage. The county assessors caught up to market values. The state-level reforms helped at the margin but did not reverse the trend. The bills will keep arriving. The assessments will keep climbing until something structural changes, and the homeowners who can move are quietly choosing the alternatives. The migration corridors that emerged after 2020 are in significant part property tax-driven. The census data and IRS migration data confirm what the assessment notices have been signaling for years. If this list helped, share it with the friend who keeps insisting their property tax bill is fine. Hit subscribe, because next we're breaking down 10 American cities where the property tax bill just doubled with specific city-level data. Drop a comment if your property tax bill jumped meaningfully in 2024, 2025, or 2026. And remember, the worst property tax crisis isn't the loud one with the headlines. It's the quiet one where the assessment notice arrives in February, the bill arrives in April, and the homeowner who didn't open the envelope finds out in August how much the year just changed.